Hello everyone, this is Tony with TerraSky, and today we're going to cover how to utilize the Visualforce Import with SkyVisualEditor. This means you can now import in your custom coded Visualforce pages into SkyVisualEditor to be leveraged and maintained as you would the pages that we typically have created with the studio. Now, the kicker to this is that we currently only support standard controllers, so if you have a custom controller, you will have to wait for a future update. But for the time being, if you have standard controllers with some kind of extensions, those are fine to be imported in. Now, the way this works is, as you can see on the screen, I've made a custom Visualforce page, and it's utilizing the standard controller for the account object. There are several things in this code that don't work with SkyVisualEditor, and so I'll show you how to handle those different sections. That's primarily what this video is going to cover. Otherwise, what's going to happen is it's going to interpret our code and then translate it into the different components and properties that exist inside of SkyVisualEditor, making it very simple to port your pages into SkyVisualEditor to manage and maintain. So let's go ahead and take a look at this page inside of SkyVisualEditor. So I simply change tabs, and in order to get the Visualforce importing to work, you would go to File, Import Visualforce Page. You're going to find the Visualforce page that you want, so I'll choose my Tony's custom Visualforce page here, and click OK. And as I mentioned, it's going to do its best to interpret the page and then produce as much information as possible to let you know what's going on. Now, there's a new component specifically for the new Visualforce importing. It is called our code block component. I won't have time to dive into it. It's a great enhancement to the platform. It allows you to see all of the code that we don't understand in the raw code format, so you don't lose anything. And that's about as deep as we're going to go in this video. There is a separate video that covers how to use that component in depth, so you can watch that video and reference it there. Now, there are several things I should point out here. The first of which is that if there is jQuery, some kind of scripting here, this doesn't work with our platform, as we don't have any section that allows you to go and just raw code out jQuery, so we just leave it as your raw code. There are sections on the right hand side where you can include page scripting, so if you wanted to, you can simply copy that and go to Edit Script and paste it in right here, or you can add it as a third-party reference like I have. I have some, as an example, jQuery mobile resources that are in my static resources area that I'm referencing. Those will be included inside of the script include section here automatically for me. The next thing I should point out is that there's HTML. Our studio doesn't utilize HTML, so whenever it encounters it, it just leaves it as the raw code, which means if you double click this, you then can come in and add in your own code in here, which is quite nice. So if I wanted to add in something like hello world right here, I have the capability of doing that and working just fine with this. And if you notice, there's now the new tag called hello world inside, so you can expand and collapse this, and you've got all of that code right there. The next thing I should point out is that in my raw code, I had several images that I was referencing. Okay, these were from static resources earlier, and I have properties that existed for those resources. So what it's going to happen is it's going to take that code, convert it into a SkyVisualEditor component. This is our image component. And on the right hand side, the image source is now going to reference that URL location for the static resource. Additionally, any of the properties that it had are now going to be added into a new property that exists called additional attributes. And here is going to give you the key value pairing for all of the properties that will be added to this component when it's deployed. So you don't lose any of your functionality whenever you import that into SkyVisualEditor. Comments are imported in. You can move these comments around, drag and drop them wherever you need to have the comments added into the raw code on the back end of the page. This is only going to show if you're actually looking at the raw code, meaning if you're looking at if a user is looking at this page, they don't actually see this is my sample comment. This is simply to show where it's going to be located in the code when you're looking inside of the studio. Now, there are other things like the edit account page block sections, your save button, field references. Those all came over as normal, and that's fairly straightforward to understand how that works. You just drag and drop from that point forward, and it's exactly like using our studio any other time. But if you notice, the save button's got this orange and yellow tint to it. This means there's some kind of error or warning to that component. We need to identify what that is. So if I scroll down and find something here, it looks like I have a warning for that component, and it says that there's already a save action that is produced by SkyVisualEditor, and therefore the save action that's on the standard controller is no longer being utilized. That's fine. I can delete that warning. And as I do that, that save button is no longer highlighted in yellow. So that's how you handle the warnings as you deal with them, is if there's something that you can quickly fix the warning and then delete the warning, and it will remove the little icon to show you what's happening. Now, if you accidentally delete something and you wanted to go back and figure out how to get access to that again, there is a section in here where you can go to Tools, click Log, and it'll show you all the errors and warnings that existed upon the import from the very beginning. So you have a full log of what's taking place here. Next, I should show you that there are errors. There are times when fields just can't be imported. Maybe you referenced them a little bit odd, let's say a variable or some kind of reference that we don't use in the studio. That's fine. You'll simply produce this error message here, and you may have to reproduce that field. So what you would do in this case is I look on the right-hand side. This is the SLA custom field that I've created, so I can remove this. On the left-hand side, I can search for SLA, and I can add that back to the canvas, and I now have that here. Alternatively, you can select one of these components, and there's a field property on the right-hand side. You can click that and search for that field yet once again, and fill that back in, and it'll reactivate that field. We have an entirely separate video on how to change the field and object references, so if you'd like to learn about that, there is another tutorial that goes more in depth on how to utilize that functionality. Some other things to point out is that, again, as I mentioned, the HTML, so this is a paragraph tag, is simply going to be displayed as raw code. However, I should say that this top section here, I was using a global reference, so it was the $user.firstname that we are referencing here, and that produces an error. Why? Because we don't use the global references when referencing the fields. So it produces an error because it doesn't understand that reference. So this is a situation where you would want to remove that field entirely, and if you want the user's first name, then you can add that in by searching for first name as an example, or if you wanted to find, let's do first name here. So we want to find user, I guess, created by, and then you can find the user first name inside of here. And so this is where you would actually get that information and drag it back onto the canvas. So you'd say first name, drag this back on, and that's how you would reproduce that user.firstname category listing. So that's one option, and you can simply remove that once you have that section added onto the page in SkyVisualEditor. I don't need that paragraph tag anymore. Another thing to point out is there are situations inside of Salesforce where their related list have this edit and delete actions column. Well, that's not functionality that we utilize with our data tables. We have a different method of doing deletes and edits. So I can simply remove those columns because that's not the method used with SkyVisualEditor. And as I select this data table, on the right-hand side, I can then select that I want the user to be able to delete the row. It's going to give me a little confirmation that I do want that. And you now notice there's a delete icon at the top. And if I want the user to be able to edit these records, I can either add in the bulk edit section, or I can have them add the capability of inline editing to these fields, or they can open up that record by selecting the full name and choosing this to be a linkable field for them to utilize at that point. So you've got several options with this. Another thing I should point out is that this lets me know that there was a variable associated with this particular data table that's no longer being referenced by SkyVisualEditor. So earlier I mentioned there is an additional attributes field. You can click this ellipsis, you can click the add key. I'll add this variable back in, so here's my var, and click OK. Now this my var is added back into that component when it's deployed, so I can delete that warning, and that yellow highlighting now goes away. So this is how you would handle some of the errors that might take place, as well as working with some of the raw code that comes in when we cannot understand the code that you have created with your custom writing of the pages. I hope this helps. Thanks for watching.